Alright, hey everyone, I am currently on the first level of the bird's nest in section M row 21. And right below me is what they call the infield, which is basically the central area of the bird's nest stadium. Alright, now take a look. This is the footage I am getting from the Vivo X300 Ultra's telephoto lens. But since we are so far away, this is pretty much pushing the limits of what a phone can do. But this time, Vivo has pulled out his ultimate weapon, a super telephoto zoom lens with a 400mm equivalent focal length. So let us see what the video looks like, shall we? Alright, check this out. Tell it that we are talking about a distance of roughly 100 meters, but the shot has the quality and clarity of a TV broadcast. And get this, we are only at 400mm right now. I can switch over to 800mm and suddenly it is like you have got a private one-on-one concert. Of course, you can also switch over to 1600mm, but I should point out, at 60mm, you will notice a more obvious drop in clarity. This is pretty much pushing the telecommuter to his absolute limit. And also, pay close attention to his details. I am currently shooting at 16mm completely handheld. The stabilization is just insane. Alright, check this out. That little white dot, that is Jason Jung. Alright, now I am going to show you a side-by-side comparison. On one side, we have the footage shot directly from the phone's lens, and on the other, the same shot but with a 400mm teleconverter attached. Take a look, and let me just stress this again. This is the bird's nest, and I am sitting somewhere in the middle section. Now, I know some of you must be wondering, what if I were to shoot from the top tier seats? How clear would the stage be then? Security would not let me through, so I could not get up to the top level to film from above. But I can shoot towards the mountaintop from the first floor. I am shooting the top tier seats on the opposite side. And just to be clear, the distance you are seeing here is actually much farther than the distance from those top tier seats to the stage. So this time Vivo has developed two teleconverters for the X300 Ultra. One is an upgraded version of the 200mm, and the other one is the 400mm super telephoto zoom lens, which we just got a little taste of. The new 200mm lens is noticeably shorter than the previous generation, making it much more compact and lightweight. Now, let us compare it to a 200mm full-frame lens. As you can see, this is where the portability advantage of Vivo's telephoto lens really shines. The new 200mm is 50 grams lighter than the previous generation, and the new 400mm is only 50 grams lighter than that old 200mm lens. So for a 400mm lens, this is incredibly lightweight than the Pro. Of course, still as only if your friend William times is 30 grams apart. I've been testing two latest cylinders for some days, and I swear I can feel my arm muscles getting tight. If I were going to a concert myself, I would probably skip the grip. Every little bit of weight saved helps, at 400mm. And at this time, it exclusively features the 400mm engraving. Both of the new teleconverters use aspherical lenses. This is the first time Vivo has used aspherical lenses, which deliver better optical performance. So once you have put on the phone case, attached the adapter ring, screwed on the lens, and added the grip, this is what the phone setup looks like. What you are looking at now is the heavy-duty telephone casing form, one of the four configurations for the X300 Ultra. So, let us kick things off with the first question I am sure you all have. How do you choose between these two teleconverter focal length? First off, for concerts, if you are sitting in the middle section of an arena or in the front rows of a stadium, I would say the 200mm is the better choice, giving you more options for framing your shot. If you go with a 400mm, a lot of the time you might just be stuck with a half-body shot. It is super clear, for sure, but it can get a bit monotonous. So let us take a look at this comparison. Here I am sitting in the very last row of the theater. On the left, you have the shot from the 200mm lens, and on the right, the 400mm. The problem with the 400mm, as you can see on the right, is that it only gets you a shot from the waist up, so the field of view is pretty limited. So if you are sitting in the nosebleed sections of an arena or in the mid to back rows of a stadium, the 400mm is definitely the way to go. I am shooting from a middle section of the bird's nest, right in the center of the stage. This is the field of view with a 200mm teleconvert, and this is the view you get with the 400mm. Set from this spot, I would say the 400mm is definitely the better choice. Also, I have put the clarity comparison between the 200mm and 400mm teleconverters from the same spot right here for your reference. One thing I found really great while testing out the teleconverter is that Vivo has opened up almost all of its features to work with it. For example, at a concert, you can turn on both the front and rear cameras to record at the same time, so you can be in the same frame with your favorite artist. You can also record with two of the rear cameras at the same time. This way, the ultra-wide and telephoto lenses work simultaneously, giving you the full scene from the ultra-wide and a close-up from the telephoto. For example, if you're shooting birds, take a look at this. This is a bird I filmed at 400mm. In 4K, it does not. It looked like something straight out of a nature documentary. Spring is here, and the birds are starting to build their nests. Vivo also enables 4K 120fps video recording at focal length speed of 400mm, allowing you to slow down the footage by up to 5 times. You can also use this telephoto length and slow to move for capture or for 100mm footage selection. Just take a look at the detail on these water splashes. While I had a break from birding, I snuck into the crowd of old-timers. Look, I didn't need to leave. Where do you... Oh, wait, who can zoom in on the video you posted for 8 and 9,000s? Now for some additional details on the teleconverter. First off, the 3 teleconverters from both generations are completely interchangeable. So, what that means is, if you bought one of the older teleconverters, I can use it directly with the new X300. And on the flip side, you can also screw the new teleconverters onto older models like the X300 Pro or the X200 Ultra. Second, different teleconverters have their own specific image stabilization algorithms. However, the stabilization algorithm for the 400mm teleconverter is not yet compatible with older models. This will be addressed later through a software update. Third, the 400mm teleconverter amplifies a problem that already existed with previous teleconverters once you twist the lens. A field of view becomes so narrow that it is easy to lose your subject. So, for this, I am attaching to Vivo. Could not you just use the NEN camera edited guide? Sure, part of the NEN camera's view will be blocked by the lens, but at least I could still use the other half to use as a reference. And fourth, so about this 400mm lens, I'm pretty sure that when it first launches production, it just will not be able to keep up with demand. After all, in theory, this is a lens that is compatible with multiple generations of the X series. So if you are thinking about getting one, you will have to be quick on the draw. In fact, I think Vivo's impact on the concert scene has really become a huge part of the user experience at this point. I went to a concert at the end of last year, my very first one ever. Literally, everyone around me was using Vivo's teleconverter. Fifth, Vivo has also specifically optimized the audio for concert scenarios, offering two distinct recording modes, concert vocals and concert atmosphere. So I went ahead and tested it out for you guys. You guys, While I was testing out the Vivo X300 Ultra, one thing really stood out to me, Vivo's ambition to turn the single device into three distinct products. The first is a powerful telephoto lens that can shoot from anywhere, from the Bird's Nest Stadium to the African savannah. The second is a street photography camera with charming retro colors. And a mirrorless camera packed with a wealth of professional features. Camera. Alright, so that is the telephoto lens. Now, let us move on to the second part of today's video. Vivo wants to turn the X300 Ultra into a retro street photography camera. Now, besides its main lens, which is a 35mm lens, a classic focal length for documentary and street photography, and its 85mm classic telephoto portrait lens, so this time around, Vivo is introducing three new features for street photography. First up, we have the color palette. Now, the version I am testing is an engineering firmware, so unlike the iPhone, you cannot re-edit the photo with the palette after you have taken it. But the Vivo has officially stated that they will be pushing out a firmware update. Once that is live, you will be able to do what they can on the iPhone. Vivo has a fix before you shoot and re-edit that afterward. But the color palette is really just an appetizer. What Vivo is truly bringing with it are 5 distinct color styles. These include the positive and negative styles, which were already available on the previous generation. These two styles simulate the colors of Fujifilm's incredibly popular positive and negative films. And at this time, they have added 2 new ones, Rich and Chasing Light. They are a pair. These are emulating the positive and negative films from The Legend of Tracy Time with the Camera, the Ricoh, and I have to say, it is my first time really getting a film from Ricoh's positive and negative modes, and man, they feel great! But what really get me was this. When I took these photos and looked back at them, I did not feel like they had a strong filtered look. I just thought they were genuinely beautiful. And I think that feeling is a huge step up from your typical phone filters. And speaking of which, I have to mention Ricoh. Actually, I have heard about the Ricoh GR series for a long time, but man, that little camera costs like $1,000. Plus, I have never been a huge fan of filters, colors, or photography in general, so I have never bought or even tried a Ricoh camera. I have never even bought a portrait film camera. I've never Ricoh camera. But for me, this experience is probably the lowest cost opportunity for many users to get a feel for those aurora-like colors. You know, I rarely use film filters in my day-to-day photography, and there is one main reason for that. Once you apply a filter, you cannot go back to the original authentic colors. When you are looking back at old photos, you still want to be able to restore that moment to its most authentic state, and this time, Vivo has solved the problem of post-shot restoration with this new palette feature. The second upgrade of X300 Ultra brings to its street photography mode is that both the main and telephoto lenses now support 200 megapixels. Just take a look at this. So I went to Universal Studios to take some photos of this girl. Rose, we were about like 2 or 3 meters apart, something like that. It was all just natural outdoor light, no extra equipment at all. So I just switched over to portrait mode. I switched to 200 megapixels, hit the shutter, and well, it does take a little while for the 200 megapixel image to process. But what I did was this absolutely stunning photo. Just take a look at the texture of the skin, the details on the lips, and the individual strands of hair. Let us compare it with the X200 Ultra. Its telephoto lens maxes out at 50 megapixels, and that is when you really appreciate that every single pixel in that 200 megapixel sensor truly has a purpose. But as you have probably noticed, I am a bit far away from the subject here. So I have decided to tackle my biggest weakness, time to whip out the 200mm Magic Wand for an ultra-close portrait. Let us use some magic to close the distance. So, with the 200mm lens, you are looking at about a half body shot. And this is the photo you get. Now you guys tell me, does it look good or not? So, what are the 3 core elements of portrait photography? Is it a photographer, the camera, and a teleconverter? Well, how about 200 megapixels combined with a 200mm teleconverter? Let us zoom in on the photo and check out the details on the eyebrows. See, it does not look digitally processed at all, does it? Now let us look at a Vivo Portrait Beauty eyebrow. On the left, we'll get a visual camera shot, and on the right, with the beauty mode turned on. With the beauty mode on, you can clearly see it softens the lighting on the face. If they zoom in for a cuter look, you would see it mainly smoothed out fine lines and some minor blemishes with through CubeSat amazing natural texture to the skin. And like I was saying, you can mainly closer beauty mode until not closer. And there you have it. And if you add a dynamic magic photo effect, like the live photo one, this short clip also gets the beauty algorithm applied. So, that begs the question, what happens if I combine the 400mm teleconverter with the 200 megapixel mode and Vivo's beauty algorithm? What kind of photo would that create? Alright, let us roll the clip. Alright, as you can see, this portrait right here was shot using the 400mm teleconverter combined with the 200 megapixel mode. So, compared to the 200mm lens, this photo has about a quarter of the field of view. That is why all you are left with is a tight quarter of the face. Let us zoom in and check out the details from the 200 megapixel sensor combined with the 400mm lens. Look at these eyelashes and the texture around the corner of the eye. Oh my god, it honestly looks just like a proper camera shot. There is none of that digital look to it at all. And look at the details on the lips. See the fine hairs right next to them? And over here on the collar. Can you see that? The intricate texture of the knit. And get this, this is a 200 megapixel photo. The shutter speed and image processing are way faster compared to the X300 Pro. Right now, the only slight downside is that the 200 megapixel mode does not retain the HDR effect. Alright, let me add a few thoughts on the camera experience. First off, I want to point out a drawback. The default interface is missing an exposure control. So if you want to adjust the exposure, you have to go into the palette in advance, and only then will you find the exposure control. And exposure is different for each curve palette. Personally, I use the exposure control all the time in my daily shooting, so if we let the current access point as delete. Second, a major upgrade. This time, Vivo has finally added support for customizing the various functions on the camera interface. The thing is, Vivo's camera is just packed with so many features. It is almost too much, and with all the different monthly membership features, it was just overwhelming to look at before. But now Vivo lets you hide or even remove all those cluttered features, which really takes the pressure off my daily use. And the third point is the X300 Ultra I mentioned earlier. Back then, the camera features always came with some weird restrictions. Like, you had to turn one feature on, you had to turn another one off. Or you could only activate a certain feature in a specific mode. But with the X300 Ultra, I can feel that what Vivo is doing is breaking down those barriers. They are moving away from a feature-by-feature approach. Now, you can use everything everywhere, and it all just works well in any setup. Alright, so for the third and final part of today's video, let us talk about the third device that Vivo has positioned this Ultra to be a professional mini mirrorless camera. Now, the first feature of this micro mirrorless is cinematic mode. It is a video recording function that gives you those film-like colors. For smartphone, this does not sound all that new. It is usually just cropping the top and bottom, cropping it to add black bars and change the aspect ratio to 21:9. But what Vivo did this time is different. Just take a look at this video. I shot this with the X300 Ultra. Does not. I have a really strong cinematic feel. Now, I have tested a ton of phones, and there are quite a few models out there that claim to have a cinematic video recording mode, but with the X300 Ultra, that is that first one that, at first glance, I could tell looked incredibly close to a real cinematic shot. 2. How does what Vivo has done compare to the traditional movie modes on other phones? First off, you have got the 21:9 wide aspect ratio plus 24 FPS a low frame rate. These are pretty standard, so I will not get into them. Second, they have added cinematic color grading. That teal orange color style that everyone is pretty familiar with, so I will not go into too much detail on that either. Third, Vivo has specifically added a motion blur effect to simulate a film camera. So, what does that actually mean? See, when you are shooting on the film camera, because of the shutter speed, whenever a person moves, that motion in each frame is perfectly sharp. And that is when I was shooting on the phone, which has that motion blur effect. So, you can see on the left, this is a normal video recording from a phone. Every frame is perfectly sharp. But on the right, you see a blurry film. It is actually like what you see on the right, where the blurred frames are connected into a video by the persistence of vision in our eyes. This motion blur creates a unique sense of speed, a hallmark of cinema, and with the X300 Ultra, Vivo has managed to bring that sense of speed back to life. Fourth, there is the highlight bloom effect, which Vivo has specially tuned to be more cinematic. This effect enhances the presence of light. This also boosts the image's contrast, while at the same time, making the light feel incredibly soft. It is a quality you just do not get from traditional smartphone video. So with the power of these 4 algorithms, you get a video effect that is incredibly cinematic. So let me break this down. Within the cinematic mode, you actually have 2 options, film look and film style. The style mode is what we were just talking about. It delivers the most authentic cinematic effect. And for film look, first off, it also has cinematic color grading, but you can choose to shoot at 60 frames per second. And with 60 FPS, theoretically you can do it 2 times slow most. Third, you can choose to shoot in 16:9 to utilize the full sensor, or crop to 21:9 and just use a portion of it. So compared to the style mode, it actually adds 2 customizable scenes, but the blue mode does not have the motion blur and soft light algorithms. So if you are really going for that cinematic feel, then film style is definitely the one that gets it right. So I made sure to take the X300 Ultra out and tested in a bunch of these cinematic scenes. I went to the Harry Potter section and filmed the train. Take a look, everyone. Does not this just have a really cinematic feel? Then I went to the Jurassic section to film a raptor, and when I played back the video, it felt just like watching a movie. But a quick heads up, whatever you do not waste your time waiting in line for this. So what you were seeing in my video right now, these few seconds of footage, that is literally all there is to this ride. And over in the Jurassic area, I spotted the 4 descendants of the Raptor Squad, the Swift Sparrow Squad. While I was there, I made sure to ask Vivo if they would include any skin tone protection. So Vivo's answer was that they did not specifically build in skin tone protection like they do for the portrait video mode, but they did optimize skin tones. From my own testing, I would say the skin tone rendering is perfectly acceptable to me. If I had to point out a weakness in the cinematic color, I would say it is that the color style is a bit too intense for my taste. If it were a bit more subtle, or if there was a way to manually adjust the intensity, I would probably be more inclined to use it in my own videos. As it is now, this rather intense style might draw some attention away from the main subject. The second major upgrade for the professional, mini mirrorless experience is log mode. This is the first time Vivo has truly enabled recording 4K 120 FPS 10-bit log video across all focal lengths. Plus, you can apply LUTs directly in the preview for monitoring, and for editing, I used a Vivo Pad 6 Pro, which was also released by Vivo, running CapCut Pro. This tablet is also powered by the Snapdragon 805 EDF, so you will not have any issues with editing smoothness. Vivo will officially provide a LUT pack, which includes things like Vivo original color and simulations of all the film, like color styles we have talked about before. I have tried this out and it feels pretty good, and the best part, it is completely free. Since the video format now supports 120 frames per second recording, you can slow it down to 5 times slow motion in post-production. You can also shoot in HDR format directly. The screen itself supports 4K Dolby Vision, so HDR videos play back perfectly, giving you a ton of creative options in post-perfection. So once you get your hands on the phone, you can go ahead and add your own favorite LUTs and shoot at whatever frame rate you like. And the third optimization for the professional mini mirrorless experience is a feature hidden within the regular video recording mode called Original Color Style. And this, I have to say, is the feature that surprised me the most this time around. So what Vivo does is they minimize the digital algorithms during video recording to really let the camera's optical capabilities shine through. So what are the pros and cons? Well, first off, the downside is the camera's dynamic range. It is definitely not as high as what you would get from a phone. On the left, you can see the straight out of camera results from the phone, where the blue of the sky really pops on the right. It looks a bit washed out. But its advantage is that it gets rid of that digital look that so many users hate. On the left, it's standard recording, and on the right is original color recording. See that video algorithm, sharpening that so many people hate? It is gone now. Here's a video of someone. To the right, we have standard recording, and on the right, we have original color recording. On the left, there is some sharpening that's super obvious. And here's my absolute favorite, Princess Bianca from Universal Studios. Now take a look at the right side. Even though she does not have that golden sunset glow from the HDR background, but the skin tones have this amazing camera-like contrast. You can see the details in the princess's hair, the texture of her skin. The true color camera on the right delivers an incredible amount of detail. So the biggest surprise for me this time around is that for Android imaging flagship, when you use a larger lens assembly to house 2 nearly 1-inch sensors, you should really leverage the advantages of those large sensors. And here, let me add a few bit details about video recording. First off, the first time they have included the blueprint of the polar lens. This allows for more accurate color reproduction, especially in complex lighting environments. For instance, under monochromatic lighting, like red or blue, it delivers a more accurate Kaleido production that is true to what the human eye sees. Second, let us talk about the downside, which is the transition between the focal lengths. Let me show you the comparison from the ultra wide to the main camera, and then to the trans wide. You can see that they trunking the focal lengths as basically double the previous length. So when the user jumps from one focal length to the main, there is similar photo. But with Vivo, the jump from the ultra-wide to the main camera is just so much smaller. So here's a suggestion for Vivo. They should change the focal length anchor point for video recording. For example, by adding a wider focal length like 24mm or 28mm. I mean, you made the main camera sensor so big. It's not the whole point to de-emphasize the concept of a main lens. The third small detail is the stabilization. This time, Vivo has upgraded its stabilization algorithm for video recording. Just take a look at these clips. It is completely stable, almost like using a mini gimbal. So, these 3 aspects are how Vivo aims to turn the X300 Ultra into 3 distinct devices: a telephoto powerhouse, a retro street shooter, and a professional mirrorless camera. So, reviewing the X300 Ultra this time, I was personally surprised, and not just by its features. What I really felt was a shift in Vivo approach to building their imaging flagship. First, breaking the limitations of different features across various scenarios. In other words, making one feature adaptable to all situations. And the other thing is, they had the courage to simplify, to reduce visual clutter and pressure on the user from the interface. And I have got to say, from my experience using it, I have really benefited from this approach. So to sum it up in one sentence, I think the X300 Ultra is probably the most distinctive Ultra model in the X series from the last 3 generations. And also the most polished one yet. If you get the chance, you should definitely go and experience it for yourself. Alright, that is everything for this video. I hope it was a helpful reference for you. I am Joe Menza, and I will see you in the next one.